Right now, we have yet another black athlete being targeted by racial power structures, WNBA player Brittney Griner. She remains in prison in Russia for the possession of marijuana while the U.S. negotiates a deal to secure her freedom. But the twice impeached ex-president Donald Trump simply cannot help himself. Over the weekend, Trump appeared on a podcast where he launched racist attacks against Griner. He called her spoiled and overstated the amount of marijuana that she says she brought accidentally into the country. He basically said that the U.S. should not engage in a prisoner swap for her release.
It's true.
Would you have made, by the way, the offer for Brittney Griner and Victor Bout that Russia has put forward, where they'll trade this arms dealer's 25 years for arms dealing all over the world for the WNBA player and also I believe a former Marine is being held there.
And for full context, the man who mispronounces Victor Bout and can't seem to remember Paul Whelan's name is this side mouth who has made appearances on Donald Trump's YouTube channel. His name is Buck Sexton. He also believes January 6th was not an insurrection.
She went in there loaded up with drugs into a hostile territory where they're very vigilant about drugs. They don't like drugs. And she got caught. And now we're supposed to get her out, and she makes a lot of money, I guess. But we're supposed to get her out for a absolute killer and one of the biggest arms dealers in the world. Killed many Americans, killed many people. And he's going to get a free card, and we're going to get her. She knew you don't go in there loaded up with drugs. And she admitted it. I assume she admitted it without too much force because it is what it is. And it certainly doesn't seem like a very good trade, does it? He's an absolute one of the worst in the world, and he's going to be given his freedom because a potentially spoiled person goes into Russia loaded up with drugs.
And
So much wrong with this. First, loaded up with drugs? Per Russian state media, the quantity cited by the prosecutor was 0.702 grams, or about 2/100ths of an ounce. As a matter of fact, Russia labeled what Griner had a significant amount. Let me ask y'all a quick question. Since when is less than a gram loaded up with drugs? Secondly, why are you using and propagating Russian talking points? He keeps calling it drugs in a derogatory way when, as many have learned, and Griner ascribes to, marijuana can be used for medicinal purposes. She had a doctor's note for use. Trump also stated that Griner went into Russia intentionally with all this stuff, where her testimony would beg to differ. The substance ended up in my bags by accident, and I take responsibility, but I did not intend to smuggle or plan to smuggle banned substances to Russia. Griner, who was arrested at a Moscow airport in February, said during cross-examination in her trial. He also says she admitted it. Let's hold off on that notion. As The Athletic informed us, the guilty plea was a route to a potentially more lenient sentence in a country that has a conviction rate that is higher than 97%, meaning no matter if she admitted guilt, she was in all likelihood going to be found guilty. Investigative reporter TJ Quinn printed in his piece, sources said the guilty plea to charges of drug possession and smuggling was a strategy to help facilitate a prisoner swap that could bring her home, and it also was a recognition that there was no way she was going to be acquitted. A point one Russian law expert backed up. Dr. William Pomeranz, the acting director of the Wilson Center's Kennan Institute and a former Georgetown professor on Russian law, told The Athletic, I do believe, from her perspective, the fastest way to get to a prisoner swap is to plead guilty. The fastest way to end this nightmare for her is to plead guilty and proceed to this deal. Now, there are plenty of things that can unravel this deal, especially since it has never been announced and Russia has basically said, don't pressure us. But clearly, I think her lawyer and advisors must have felt the best way to end this is for her to plead guilty. Trump's comments also remind us of this tweet. The House Judiciary GOP Twitter account tweeted, if this were Trump, she'd be home. Whoever runs that account seems to have conveniently forgotten that American Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed were in prison throughout Trump's tenure in office, and neither were released. Reed was released in April after a prisoner exchange with Russia. He has actively worked in media appearances to combat GOP attempts to leverage his ordeal in Russia for pro-Trump messaging, wrote Kimberly St. Julien Varnon, PhD student at the University of Penn. Popular black conservative documentarian Errol Weber, who you should not take seriously, portrayed Griner as a hypocrite for turning to the American government to aid her. Conservative commentator Todd Starnes went so far as to argue that Biden should keep Griner in Russian custody until she publicly repudiates her stance on the anthem. Such Republican and conservative opinions are clearly cruel and wildly unhelpful, but do they matter in the larger scheme of American public discourse? I'd argue yes, added Julian Varnon, because they highlight how the GOP, like Russia, often seeks to capitalize on the suffering of black people and other minorities for political gain. In reality, she is representative of multiple demographics targeted by the GOP: black Americans, LGBTQ individuals, and women. It is not a coincidence that cynical GOP tweets about Griner garner responses that are anti-black, anti-gay, and anti-trans. Here's the thing. This is a guy who wants to be a dictator. He wants to be an authoritarian. He looks up to the styles of Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. Okay? He also, as we have seen many times, taken Russia's side on really any issue that comes to light. He will provide them cover. He will do anything he can to simply get whatever emphasis is being made against Russia to something else. So should we be shocked when a wannabe dictator speaks up and sticks up for a dictator? No. He has a long history of standing up for Russia, even against American interests, and frequently touts his great relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. When Putin launched the invasion into Ukraine earlier this year, the former president called it genius. Trump openly asked for Russia's help in 2016 to hack into rival Hillary Clinton's emails, and then used material stolen by Russian spies to attack Clinton in the final stretch of the election. In 2018, Mr. Trump's most famous moment of breaking with U.S. orthodoxy came alongside Putin in Helsinki, where the two leaders met for a bilateral meeting at the start of the U.S. president's second year in office. Specifically, he told reporters he disagreed with the official assessment from the U.S. Intelligence Committee that the DNC was hacked by Russian-linked operatives to uncover information that would be politically damaging for Clinton. Trump frequently criticized numerous members of the defensive pact, including Germany, for what he said were unfair contribution levels to the military alliance and caused friction between the U.S. and European allies as a result. In 2020, the U.S. president said it was common sense to readmit Russia to the G7, making it the G8 again, something the other members rejected. Russia was expelled from the group of wealthy countries after Putin seized the Ukrainian region of Crimea in 2014. He frequently threatened to end unfair trade deals with G7 allies and personally attacked Canada and its Prime Minister Justin Trudeau over dairy tariffs. He also threatened to slap tariffs on France, targeting the country's wine exports. One official at the International Crisis Group told Politico in 2019 that the meetings of G7 leaders had become a nightmare under Trump.